Hello and welcome back to the Mental Music Podcast, a podcast made for teens by teens exploring mental health from our perspective. My name's Gordon.
And my name's Grace, and if you didn't catch us on Sin Nation, just check us out on SoundCloud.
This episode we'll be discussing generations and how they have been affected over time.
But first, a quick disclaimer, we're not professionals, we're just two 15-year-olds behind a mic.
And any advice that we do give should not be considered a replacement for professional medical advice.
If you're experiencing any mental health issues of your own, go to our website where we have some super helpful links, or just talk to somebody that you know and trust.
Some peace someday, it'll all be here. It'll all be here. And if you tell her that you love her so, just know it's always warmer here and never snows.
So, welcome to the next generation. So, today we're going to be talking about how Generation Z, or as Gordon likes to be a special snowflake and say, I'm more millennial than you.
Well, I am.
Yeah.
I'm born in 2001, you were born in 2002, so...
Righto.
There you go.
Alrighty, but before we get into that topic, we're looking at what exactly is a generation. So,
Pretty much, a generation is like a group of years that a certain section of society is born in. So say, you might have heard the baby boomers back in after World War II, the 40s to 60s. That's when like a lot of people came back from the war and they had tons of babies.
also the second largest generation.
As you do. There you go. And in about 30, 40 years, well maybe 20 years, they're going to start, sort of being shifted out by people like millennials or Generation Z.
Ooh. Anyway, so moving on from what a generation is, let's talk about perhaps our generation, so Generation Z, and how
please. Hey, Grace insists on saying Generation Z, and
I said Z.
Yeah, but
You are mishearing.
hey, yeah, no, I heard you, but wrecked. Generation Z is
Typically from around 2000 to 2010. And
Yeah.
this is because it's in a world that's post 9/11, post Great Recession,
The recession of 2007, 2008 was
basically when the economy got really
there was a
stuffed.
massive stock market crash, and pretty much people born from
People
2000, they
screaming.
were affected by it. They weren't screaming, Kai. It was 2008.
The economists were screaming. I can assure you that.
Yeah, okay, maybe then. But yeah, 2008, that happened, and people born in around 2000, they'd be directly affected by that. So they fall into that generation.
Because we were like 6 years old, we probably weren't affected by that.
Oh,
but
directly,
because we're
yeah.
growing up, because we're
Through
like
it,
becoming
we
teenagers,
witnessed
and
it. We saw it. We were alive during that
I had
period.
no idea what it was until today.
I did.
But now that I look at what it was, I can now kind of
Yeah,
see
you realise.
why it kind of affected me. But as I grow up and like develop
Yeah.
opinions and stuff like that, because we're in a world that's beyond that Great Recession now, and because our
It's not great. It's just a recession,
it's
Grace.
it's cool. It was termed the Great Recession. You Google it. It's called the Great Recession.
fine. Great.
Not to be
That's
confused with the
great.
Great Depression,
That's great, Grace.
because it's not that depressing.
Yeah.
It's just recessing.
Great.
So moving on from what perhaps how Generation Z is defined, we have to look at what's in a generation. So as Gordon said, it's people born around the same time and raised in the same place. So kind of just as a disclaimer, we're kind of talking about people in a Western society, and of course we're talking about people born in Australia. That's why Gordon thinks he's a special snowflake.
Yep, that's me.
Actually, that's one of the key characteristics of millennials, being a special snowflake. So maybe
Yeah.
maybe you are more of a
Maybe
millennial.
I am.
Just more of a special snowflake
Than
than us
you.
all.
More than you. That's the important bit, Grace.
Mm-hmm.
I think a generation, what really shapes a generation is how the people in that generation are raised by their parents, because their
Yeah.
parents are self-explanatory, the previous generation, and they would be raised differently based on previous generations to them. So it kind of like it has a knock-on effect, and that changes as time goes on, and that's what shapes now today's generation.
Yeah, and you're right there, because it's parenting, as like explained by experts, it's parenting, economy, and technology. They are the three main things that shapes a generation.
And especially in the last 20 years.
Oh yeah, definitely in the
And
past.
it peaked
20
in the
years.
past 10 years after the iPhone came out in 2006. Technology, as well as parenting and the economy, has all taken a massive either hit in economy, but they've all been affected greatly, especially in the last 10 years. So that it's easy to see why it's all changing.
I
And why-
think
yeah.
I think why Gordon and I have been arguing about this before. I think Generation Z is especially really conflicted because people who are in Generation Z are perhaps you, perhaps me, and perhaps my brothers. Now,
Yeah.
my brother's born in 2005, and so that's a year before the iPhone was released.
Yeah.
They got their first something or other at a much younger age than I got. I was definitely smashing my head into a garage door at a much younger age than my brothers were.
That's true.
Yeah. Explains a lot of things. But the point is the fact that my brothers and I are still different, despite there only being about a 3-year age gap.
Yeah.
And it may be just because I was born in more of a rural area, or the fact that my brothers were born in more urban society and brought up because they were the younger siblings, of course.
I think what it really boils down to is exposure. That's what shapes a generation.
Yeah.
So it's like everything, all of the above, shapes into one sort of overseeing category, exposure. So what technology they're exposed to, who they're exposed to, what society they're exposed to directly. So what neighborhood they live in, all that stuff.
That's right, actually, because your parents are they're older, right? So
Yes.
they're more
Yeah.
among baby boomers than Generation X.
They're on the brink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would probably explain why you are more of a millennial,
I suppose. Yeah. Like
Special
I see
snowflake.
myself as a millennial.
because he's a special snowflake. Anyway, going on to Generation Z, what really, so in that term of parenting, we should probably look at the generations before us.
Yeah.
So in the past 125-ish years, I think
It's
it
going
was.
back pretty far.
Yeah.
Grace.
Well, the thing is, these people still influence us. So the people that are still
Yeah.
kind of alive and influence society is
Baby
these
boomers
generations.
and
Well,
beyond.
the greatest generation. We have to start the greatest generation. So my grandma, who was my biggest influence in probably one of the biggest influences in my life, she was a part of the greatest generation, which is around 1910 to 1924. She was born about 1914. And so this generation, their formative events, so the event that they kind of like created and
They were the main
participated
belligerents.
in.
They were
Yeah,
the main
it was
belligerents
like
in
World
that
War
event.
Two, like building like Australia, building America,
Was
and
it
all those.
the Sydney Harbour Bridge was built by
Yeah,
those
yeah.
people?
Yeah, so these people were like, they are the greatest generation.
Oh, they were also the people that they were the bulk of society during the Great Depression as well, before
Yep.
World War Two.
And so after the greatest generation is the silent generation, and that's 1925 to 1945. So those people around 72 to 92 years old.
Too young to fight in World War Two, but at the same time too old to fight in Vietnam.
Yeah, this generation is like, actually this generation is often put in reference to Generation Z because we share the same characteristics. I'll talk about that later, but firstly, the silent generation is kind of taught to be seen and not heard. You know, like, have you ever had like a grandparent or somebody that said, you know, when I was younger, we were taught to be seen and not heard.
Yeah. The way of being brought up was
they
very
were
different.
They were
to what it was
being
before.
brought up to stay within the line, so obey the government and all of that.
Yeah.
And then we go into baby boomers.
Whee!
Woo! The generation that pretty much messed up our entire economy. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. What? Well, I wouldn't credit that entirely to them.
It's also another.
I don't know. They were there. That's the point. They were
They were
there
certainly
when it
put in.
happened.
But they
so-
also did a lot of good things. Like they
That's
fought
true.
very strongly on civil rights. So like, because this is in the era of 1940s to 1960s.
Yeah, these are people aged about 60 years old.
Yeah,
Right.
the
now.
rise in rock and roll music.
True.
Thank you, baby boomers, for rock and roll music. They did a lot of good things. They did quite a few bad things. That's just how it is, really.
Yeah.
But these would be probably around your grandparents or even somebody's parents in our, for
yeah.
us, perhaps.
Say your parents' older siblings would
Yeah,
fall under that.
53,
category.
71 kind of age.
Yes.
This is my my nana and my puppy, and all of that, so forth. And so this is also the second largest.
Generation at the moment.
Yeah,
In terms of population.
yeah, pretty big. And then and so their formative events were like the Vietnam War, and so all the protests around that. So you know, like all of that kind of hippie stuff. They probably would have. Some of them probably would have participated in that. Not many. That was more Generation X, actually. Generation X was a little bit hippie, but also the revolution of the 80s.
Oh, and that's the time period with all like the small wars that no one really cared about after Vietnam. But also, sorry.
Pretty much.
Also the political events that occurred during that. So in Britain, Margaret Thatcher. Here there was, who was it? Gough Whitlam.
I have
Was he in
no
the
idea.
80s?
I'm
not sure.
not good at politics.
Ugh, I don't know. Don't quote me on that.
Well, their formative events were like the Berlin Wall. That was pretty important.
that was
my mum
massive.
and
The
the
fall of the
AIDS,
Soviet
the
Union.
AIDS crisis as well.
Yes.
And music videos, MTV.
Yes.
Yeah.
When that came out.
Oh yeah, and the Cold War too. They were
That's true.
that was them as well. That they are my parents in Generation X, and they are actually really small and they're kind of in between the two largest generations our world has ever seen.
Yeah.
And probably will see for quite a long time by the statistics that we've shown.
Yeah, we currently can see.
And then we go on to our favorite generation, millennials.
Yeah, I think the reputation for
Yeah.
millennials has been a bit damaged because of what we've done and how we've
Reacted
what we've
to it?
done with what we've done.
Well, a lot of people will coin the term that millennials are self-entitled, and that's
Yeah.
probably because our parents have fought for their parents have fought in these civil conflicts,
Yeah.
kind of thing. They fought for like black rights, and
Yeah.
they fought for perhaps gay marriage and stuff like that.
And then the millennials are born into a period where that's no longer an issue. That they
Yeah.
don't have to actually care about it, and they don't realise that it was a big issue.
Yeah, and that's
20 years
also that
before.
carries on to Gen Z and also Generation Alpha, which is the babies at the moment.
Yes.
So this is so with millennials, their formative events are 9/11.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. That's
the main probably thing that they experience, and that's what ends millennial generations, because anybody born after that,
wouldn't have been affected by it directly.
or
Like,
even
it's
a lot of
history
people
to them.
say that it's that it ends at 1995, because if you're like a 5-year-old, you probably weren't aware of what was happening in 9/11.
Yeah,
It was
but
more of a
after
past
that
event for you.
point, it's no longer history. It's actually, it was in your lifetime.
Yeah. But so these people who are millennials, they were probably deeply affected by 9/11. And so now we come on to Gen Z. Z, I'm very sorry for anyone who just got really annoyed
Yeah,
by my...
like me.
Sorry, Jordan.
Sorry, Grace.
This is where we experience stuff like global terrorism, perhaps. Like, you
Yeah.
know, Paris bombings, Syria.
Well, London bombings.
London bombings.
Was it?
Global terrorism as it is, really.
Yeah.
There's probably a million that we've missed out.
As well,
Very
after
sorry.
9/11.
Yeah. And, of course, technology advancements and social
the
media.
The iPhone in 2006, the iPad in 2010.
Dude, it's so weird, like, having, like, my first phone, which I got, which is, like, a Nokia, and then having that moved on to, like...
Yeah, and then the
fancy
younger
thing like now.
siblings who were born 5,
And they have,
6
like,
years
these
after,
fancy things. Amazing.
had, like, half the age you got them at.
Yeah, we also have, like, social media, and perhaps even millennials don't use social media as much as we do, because
That's
we've
true.
been brought up around it, and we've, like... We
It's
know
our
the
life.
tricks.
It's not... Yeah.
Yeah. We know the tricks better than you guys. Ha, take that. Suckers.
Got 'em.
Anyway, so in the next segment, we're going to talk about Gen Z, and because that's probably what you guys who are listening are, and what, like, how we're affected and by the previous generations, and why our characteristics affect perhaps our mental health.
Certainly. Okay. Cheers.
So welcome back. So we're going to pick up where we left. So that's talking about Generation Z, and as we are affected by the previous generations, which we just talked about, and why our generation is the way we are, I guess.
Also, of course, how that ties in with...
That was great English, by the way. I'm very good.
Yeah, how it ties in with mental health and how we are affected by it in that aspect.
Yeah. So you've probably seen this somewhere. I know I have, and it's the fact that people have coined, like, kids our age,
The lazy generation.
lazy generation, also, like, the depression generation as,
Yeah.
like, a term.
Mm.
And this is actually because statistically the rate of suicide has increased in the
By-
last few years, and that's for people our age.
Yeah.
And the amount of people who are diagnosed with anxiety and depression has also
Increased.
skyrocketed. Yeah. And so, well, Gordon, why do you think that this is the case?
I think that us being called the lazy generation, it comes from the fact that everything that was really an issue in the previous generation was all solved by the previous generation.
Yeah.
And it's no longer an issue. So we don't have to worry about as many things. And
We're
there's
definitely more entitled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It links into depression because if there aren't any things to worry about, then normal life and the smallest things would really set off a similar thing than if a life was really, really bad and we were having a horrible, horrible day in respect to other days. So because our normal life in respect to how life was in the previous generations is much easier than it was, it takes less to sort of trigger a reaction from us. And depression becomes more common because of this, because we're not used to having bad living standards.
Yeah. Another thing, I guess, is also tying into that technology point. So, as we said, like, Generation Z is characterized by not the rise of technology, but the increase of use of technology and the advancements in technology. social media, YouTube, all of those platforms. So you could probably say that another reason why we're kind of coined as the depression generation is because like we probably don't have as much physical connection with everybody that we know.
Yeah, it's more digital now that in the 90s the internet was developed and like MySpace turned into Facebook. Rather, what we used.
Hell
when
yeah,
that
MySpace.
Changed from MySpace to Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. So I guess another point is that in the fact that we don't get a physical connection is like it's good to have an internet friend. It's like having a pen pal.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's fun, but
it doesn't have the same it's not as special.
I
as
feel like
having
we
a physical
rely
friend.
upon that more than ever. Like we rely on texting each other as our way of communication.
Because it's just too easy.
It is. It's really easy.
And then we start relying on the easy stuff, and when something really hard comes along, that's when we get depressed.
And I mean,
that's why we're known as the depression generation, because we get it too easy.
And it is. It's so much more easier to like.
More easier. Loving it, Grace.
It is easier to tackle a problem that you face like head on and in person.
Yeah.
But if we're separated on devices as such, it's probably going to be harder to do that. And it's not our fault.
No. I think it's like the reputation that's been damaged by this stereotype that's been developed over the past 20 years. That sort of like put us into a mindset that we can't get out of it and we might as well just fit in. Because fitting in is a big part of being in the Generation Z. And
raise your hand if an older person has ever said, "You're always texting. Get off your phone. Your phone is the reason why you're doing this." Or something like, "Oh, I'm sick, Mum. That's because you're on your phone all the damn time."
Yeah, that's me every other day. Yeah, I think
that is
older generations
literally the most annoying thing.
Aren't as exposed as us.
There's actually
relatively.
it's such a huge gap between our parents and us now, as compared to perhaps like the greatest generation to the baby boomers. Sure, there was a gap. There always is a gap, but in terms of Generation Z or millennials, perhaps Gen X or baby boomers, it's huge.
Because I think, let's say, someone's born in 1980. Okay, they're not really exposed to technology as much as they would be in 1995. They go to the age of 30, then they have a child. Or let's say they're born in 1970. They grow to the age of 30, have a child, and they grow to be our age. The amount of life that they have spent being exposed to technology is much less than the amount of life that their children have. Because let's say we're 15 in 2015, and our parents are 30 when they gave birth to us in 2000, and they were born in 1970. Technology started taking a rise in 1995, let's say. I think that's like pretty much the waypoint at which it started taking a massive rise. That's about halfway through their life, and up to this point. But for us, it's been 100% of our lives that technology has been at the height it's been. And that's why we're seen as the tech-savvy generation, because we're the ones who are always on our phones because we've always had phones to be on. Yeah.
To be honest, I don't know how millennials ever got help with their tech, because it would have been so...
It would have been difficult.
That would have been hard. But anyway, so I guess we've talked about how we kind of just need to, because technology has just been like this huge factor in our lives, and the fact that we haven't had to fight as much for our civil rights, and that's kind of in Australia because we are this first world country that has a lot of entitlement, and that's just, we can't really help that.
Yeah.
This is the unfortunate thing. We can't help this. We can't just all of a sudden just stop going on our phones and stop going on social media and all that, because you're out of it otherwise. You're under a rock.
Yeah, it's sort of like the peer pressure that builds up as more people take technology on their wing. It builds up. When you try and leave that bandwagon, it hits you in the face, because the number of people that also are still on the bandwagon,
you are never going to get
"What are
me
you
to
doing?
give
What are
up
you
my
doing?"
dank memes.
Exactly. Grace needs her memes to live. and that will never change.
It's my sustenance.
Not at this rate. And of course, I think it's getting worse because after the iPhone was developed in 2006, kids who are 10 years old today would have pretty much been born into a world of iPhones, and it wouldn't be unlikely for them to be given an iPhone at a young age. While people like Grace and myself, we were still alive when Walkmans.
I remember going to sleep with my CD Walkman.
Yeah, that was a thing
Hell
when we
yeah.
were kids, and I enjoyed that. But we were never exposed to iPhones until we were 7 years old, let alone
jeez.
have
I had
access to our personal one.
the original iPod.
Oh yes.
At like age 11.
Crazy.
Oh, I played so much Doodle Jump. That was amazing.
Oh yeah. And
But there are some good things about Generation Z actually, because a lot of people have people that actually study this, unlike us, 'cause we don't actually study this.
yeah, this is just our
We're supposed to have
personal
lives, okay?
opinion.
But like people who actually study this have found out that people in Generation Z are actually supposed to be more entrepreneurship and actually more hardworking, and it's kind of because we have been on like a lot of this pressure, like you're lazy, like all you kids are lazy, you're all on your
Yeah.
devices and all that, and I guess we're all unconsciously trying to go against that and actually put in some hard work and try to be better. And our school does that too, like, oh, you have all this technology, have more exams.
yeah.
How about that?
It should be easier for you, but on the
But they still haven't fixed
on
up the
other side,
education system.
It's not ideal at
Yeah,
all.
at all. So we may have seen like we're actually old people just going, we need to get off our devices, but in reality, it's just kind of who we are.
Yeah, but then you look at the tendencies that have come about over the past 20 years. Suicide rates have increased to an all-time high for people our age. And that's like mainly because of school and the things that surround that. But also technology and the use of it has increased to an all-time high, especially at our age. And it like you can see some parallels in it. And then people older than us who study these parallels, statisticians, people like that, they all look at it and draw the lines. They connect the dots, and they can say those things, and it makes sense. But it's reached a point where if you wanted to change it, it's impossible because the peer pressure that would come of that, if you were to go individually leave the bandwagon.
Not
is
just
too
like our
great.
peer pressure, but it's the way that the future's going.
Yeah.
We need this technology to improve.
We've sort of accepted that technology is the future.
Yeah.
We're moving from petrol cars to electric cars.
And if you just leave that
solar
bandwagon,
energy.
you're just stuck in the past.
Yeah, you're. What are you gonna do? Walk to the destination?
Oh,
Yeah,
gross.
exactly. So we sort of have to accept the truth that technology is the future.
I think what's
and
really failed us
it's the reason.
is that point of parenting. So for some generations it's been the point of economics, in some generations been technology that's failed them.
War.
I think in
terrorism, all that
terrorism,
stuff,
all that.
yeah.
I think what's failed us is our parenting and the way that just because it's such a huge generation gap. Mom, I still love you, but sometimes you need, in terms of parenting and people in generations before, you need to not always blame the phones for everything, because it's just the way that the future, and we haven't had much experience on how this works, how social media works. We're the generation that's unlocking all of this and this potential. So I guess that's really like detrimented us is our parenting and the way that society views our generation, and that's probably why it's been coined the depression generation, is because we have all of this pressure and anxiety coming from a different group, from these past generations of people.
So it's not us doing it to ourselves. It's the people who
And we all have an
say it's
influence on
us
this.
that does it.
We all have an influence in this. I mean,
Yeah.
we probably do need to spend a little bit less time on our phones. I know that for sure. So we can all kind of do everything about it. But I guess we all just need to fix ourselves and learn to accept these truths and move on.
Of course.
I know that on the sandy strips off the side of the road. I used to tell myself what it is I should know, but it's gone out the window. I go too low when it got too much, 'cause that's just one part of the story of love. But somewhere in the back of my head is an image I regret. Ooh, honey, I can't see to the other side. Oh, ooh, honey, what would you do if you're never lied? Oh, ooh, do you think I'd make the same mistake twice? 'Cause all I ever wanted was you to think that I was good. Honey, would you save me from my false hurts? Ooh, la, la, I've always known what's wrong and what's indeed right. So tell me, how do I live with something done that I don't like? Climb to the top of a mountain to find that. Ooh, honey, no, I didn't mean to make you mad. Oh, ooh, trust me, I know it's not half as bad. Oh, ooh, do you think I'd do something like that? 'Cause all I ever wanted was you to think that I was good. Honey, would you save me from my false hurts? Ooh, la,
Hey, and thanks for listening today. And if you found anything that we said was offensive or untrue, just send us a quick text over our socials or send us an email on mentalmusic.org.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. And any music that you'd like us to play on our station, do feel free to send to us at a Mental Music Pod.
For the
Our
music
social
in
links.
today's episode, you can check out a description. The people that do feature on our podcast are really good and deserve a lot of attention.
And you can be that too, if you feel so inclined.
Well, thanks for listening today. We really enjoyed. Just check us out at Mental Music Pod for our socials, and I hope you tune in next week.
Right, cheers for listening.